placer muy grande estar aquí. Le quiero agradecer al Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños y a Alberto por facilitar mi presencia aquí hoy. I'm very excited and inspired by the other presentations that I have seen, and the one that just took place with Alfonso Fuentes is a hard act to follow. So I am both inspired and feel challenged at the same time. My name is Alicia Diaz, and I am a choreographer, dance artist, performer. I am here today with Coco, a wonderful musician that you will hear soon. Perhaps some of you know him as Coco. If you do, please forgive that I met him as Hector, and I haven't been able to change to Coco. So he will be Hector during my talk today. And we'd like to share with you a little bit of the work that we have been doing together for about a year and a half now, in which we have been experimenting with bomba as a point of reference in our collaboration between movement and sound. Bomba, of course, the oldest Puerto Rican music and dance form that has so many elements in it, the African, European, indigenous, and so many complex encounters, cultural encounters and interactions that have taken place during its development. So one of the things as a contemporary dance artist that was particularly interesting to me about bomba, and that is improvisation. So as a dance artist myself, I deal a lot with improvisation. I am trained in classical ballet, in modern dance, and in improvisation. And I have found, and I will talk and do throughout the next little bit, a connection that is very clear to me from my experience as an improviser and as engaged in improvisation as performance, and what bomba has taught me about improvisation. And in that link, I see an important historical and cultural potential and knowledge that happens in the improvisation itself. And understanding improvisation as a way of being able to articulate a voice, a particular voice, an individual voice within a collective, and how that, the power that has. So that is my link. That is my link into a traditional form that is of my heritage, but of which I did not know details or deep knowledge. So I was familiar with it, and I am getting to be more familiar with it now. So it's a way of returning and remembering a tradition that belongs to my heritage, but that is also unknown in some ways, and that through my own body, I am learning to access that and understanding that the body, and if you were here for a presentation on the Cuatro yesterday, it was a beautiful parallel in which Compiano, I'm forgetting the name, William Compiano, yes, talked about the cuatro, the instrument, as having a DNA of itself, that the instrument itself is a repository of history and culture, and that gives us ideas of the past. And I very much think that about the body itself. So the body carries a history that is personal, but it's also collective. And in this project that I have found myself involved in over the past year, I am looking for pistas, right? I'm looking for memories. I'm looking for ways of understanding my own identity as I delve into a much, much bigger identity that has to do with Puerto Rico, it has to do with the Caribbean, it has to do with so many other layers. So I'll talk a little bit about that back and forth. But this project was not something that I set out to do. As many things in life, and especially when we deal with identity, is not non-linear, right? And I'll take you a little bit through that process. So I began working with Hector about a year and a half ago, and we did not know each other. Hector is a original member of Calle 13 and has worked with William Cepeda, with Rubén Blades, with Shakira, all these things that I did not know when I first started working with him. And I am glad now in retrospect, because I think I would have been starstruck and intimidated, right? So he had been recommended as someone that you should work with Hector, and I said, okay, come on. And I had a project and I called him in, and I'm gonna share with you literally what we did as our first encounter. I am a contemporary dancer, he is a percussionist, we did not know each other, and I invited him to the studio and I said, I will dance for you, and would you please play for me afterwards? And I will ask Hector, he doesn't want to, but I'm going to ask Hector to come out a little bit from his cave over there. I can tell I have to talk on the microphone. So I should explain that what I'm gonna do now, I'm not thinking about bomba as I was not thinking about bomba when we first met. So I'm gonna try to pretend that I haven't done what I've done in the last year and a half, and that I'm gonna improvise just with the knowledge that I have as a dancer. As Alfonso Fuentes said, you sort of go with the first tecla. I'm gonna do something similar. Hector to collaborate with me in a project called, at that point, Memory and Resonance. That had to do with, inspired by prints on a museum in Richmond, Virginia, where we both live, and dealt with racial violence in the United States. So that was our first encounter. We created a piece together. In that process, I was very curious about how Hector responded and played with me and improvised with me. Felt that there was a particular way that he was working. And I asked him in our rehearsals, what are you thinking about when you play for me? Because it's so present. And he began to talk about what I then understood was bomba underneath, but wasn't really fully aware at the time, in which he said, you know, music, there is a pattern. There is a set pattern. But on top of that, the body says where things should go. And now I understand that clearly as coming from Hector's background from bomba. And the intuition from my side to respond to his way of working felt very, very organic. So I asked him at some point if he would teach me bomba. I was really interested in salsa at the time. I came to the United States when I was 12 years old. So I'm part of my migration story begins when I was 12 years old. And I came from Puerto Rico to Princeton, New Jersey, where I did not live in a Puerto Rican community or a Latino community. And there were things that I felt that I was missing in my cultural identity. And one of them was knowledge of cultural forms, like salsa, for example. And that became, for whatever reason, in my life, became a symbol of my lack of Puerto Ricanness. Esta muchacha puertorriqueña, bailarina, no sabes bailar salsa. But just became traumatic. And now, at whatever, 40-something that I am now, living in Richmond, Virginia, I said, I gotta learn salsa. And I found a Puerto Rican from the Bronx, Clara Toro, in Richmond, Virginia, who has taught me to learn salsa. And there I was last time at SOBs, having a really good time. So I've gone through this story of returning to deal with my identity through my body, literally, quite literally, through movement in my body. And I did originally ask Hector if he would teach me salsa. And he said no. Although he's a salsero and he plays salsa every week. But he said, but I'll teach you bomba. And it was so very interesting because in that search, then I found bomba, which is older and has influenced salsa so much and so many other music and dance forms. So it was a return way, way back to something way underneath that I began to explore, to discover, to relish in. And so we will do a little bit of bomba for you. And I do this with a great deal of respect and humildad, because I know that this is a very old tradition, of which I am barely opening like this, the tiniest door. So we will show you what I know, which is very little. And I learned from Hector, and I also did a week-long taller with Tata Cepeda in Puerto Rico. Many different ways of dancing bomba, right? You can dance with a skirt, without a skirt. I will dance with a skirt because that's how I learned the form. is I'm not performing bomba in terms of my larger project, right? I'm interested in how this physical knowledge informs my work as a contemporary dancer. How I can play with it, transform it, but reference it clearly, right? So some of the work that then I do in the studio to show something. I can take one of the piquetes, tijerilla, and I begin to play with it. Each piquete for me also has different moods or different ideas behind them that I can also play with, whether I'm actually doing the movement or not. But conceptually, it may be there. So I can have ideas of the juxtaposition of softness and sharp. There is a piquete called Mariposa that I love because of its combination of something very fluid with something very strong. And together, they say something. We began then also clearly already, as you can see, the musicalization that we will play with breaks many rules of the traditional form. So the first one being that Hector is alone. Bomba would usually have at least 2 barriles, right? The buleador for the set pattern, and then the improvisation on top with the primo. So we're playing already with different experiments. The one that we're working with here now today includes the batería. So we can show a little bit of then what is it like to be able to do piquetes and do bomba with batería and barril. He is on a cajon, on a barril, he has a maraca. One of the beautiful things for me about this collaboration is witnessing the experimentation itself. So in working with Hector, he's learning, he has learned to do this, experiment. And I have witnessed that. We do like drills, literally we call them drills. Drills of piquetes, right? And it's a beautiful process. I get blisters on my feet. I usually dance bare feet. I'm not doing it here today. But so I get blisters on my feet, and he's over there grunting. And in that process, right? Really? Okay, that's my interpretation. Sorry about that. In that process, I feel there is this joint search and discovery of returning to an old tradition with a perspective of where we are now and who we are now. And it's very individual. We work together alone in the studio, but I consider it to be part of a larger búsqueda that is taking place now, and in which I have a strong sense that bomba, in times of crisis as we are having now in Puerto Rico, clearly with a deep crisis, and in so many other ways in the world, that bomba is really very alive right now, and in the island and here in the United States. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it is a form that was born out of a system of oppression, and that in it, in its physicality, in its form, there is an idea of looking for voice, looking for perspectives, looking for collaboration in this play, this game between the dancer and the musician, who have to be alert, who have to listen to each other, who want to collaborate, because it's no fun to do a piquete que no se oye. So it's about individuality, but it's about the collective. And it requires that you participate. You cannot be a bystander for the form to live. You have to participate. So I see my work as a contemporary dance artist, as an improviser, in that context. And in that way I feel it is not only a dance that I am doing or a choreography that I am doing, but it's a proposal for how to be or think, or ways to engage with civil society. So we will share with you, to close, a structured improvisation. And by that I take, again, I see bomba as a structured improvisation. There is a shared vocabulary, both physical and auditory, and you improvise on that, right? So we have created a structured improvisation where we are then going to explore deeper these elements that I shared with you, in combining our history, our past, our knowledge with these ideas. And then if you have questions or comments and want to have a short conversation afterwards, and then we'll have some time for that. We call this talking in SCAPES.
Campo yo vivo triste, cada día sufriendo más. Ay Dios, ¿qué será de mí? Para seguir viviendo prefiero la muerte. Campo yo vivo triste, cada día sufriendo más. Ay Dios, ¿qué será de mí? Si no bailo esta bomba, me voy a morir. Estoy buscando un árbol que me dé sombra, porque el que tengo calor a mí me da. Estoy Porque el que tengo calor a mí me da. Soy buscando un árbol que me dé sombra. Porque el que tengo calor a mí me da. Soy buscando un árbol que me dé sombra. Porque el que tengo calor a mí me da. Cuña ele muere, cuña caneco. Cuña ele muere, parece un muñeco. Cuña ele muere, cuña caneco. Cuña ele muere, parece un muñeco. Cuña ele muere, cuña ele muere, cuña ele muere.
Si hay comentarios, preguntas, yo sé que hay hambre, pero si quieren pasar un ratito conversando, pues podemos hacer un poquito y después también estaremos entre el público.
Muy lindo.
Gracias. Sí.
I like the way that you keep emphasizing the contemporary dancer, because sometimes people find it a little bit hard to understand that that you can bridge tradition with something else.
Yes.
And I could see I just really appreciate that, especially the ending where you could see the beginning. There was this kind of traditional bomba movement, and then it was just like really brilliant. The way that without it being jarring, you incorporated those contemporary movements. And then I wondered a little bit about what you talked about. That was a little bit of part of your process of thinking about what's happening currently with people of color in terms of violence.
Yeah. First, as a sort of dancer, the craft of the dancing itself, I am very, very interested in precisely in bridging the traditional with the contemporary dance without it being stereotypical. That's part of my intention, right? My goal. So whether it works or not is where I get feedback about that. But how can I work with culturally specific work that does not become stereotypical or expected, right? And that's something that has been very important to me in the past. I shied away a lot from culturally specific work in my own work because of that. So I am trying to bridge that that space and how to go from one to the other without separating them completely. In this particular improvisation that we did today, as opposed to maybe other work that we have done, I am taking the time to actually show the form, right, in some of the sections of doing piquetes as piquetes, to give a really clear reference about that. And then in terms, I think that there is something really interesting to me about the idea of remembering, right, and both about remembering history, about remembering cycles of history, especially as they have to do with violence and oppression, colonialism, American imperialism, to remember that, to study that. In this case, then, I'm studying some of that through my body and a physical response to those circumstances, those social, cultural, and political circumstances out of which bomba arises as a physical response, right? As an embodied, what I call an embodied form of resistance, right? And how to do that then in this remembering is about remembering in order to move forward, not to stay in the past or glorify the past or romanticize it, but what do we learn from that that can help us move forward from where we are now, right? So those are the things that I'm dealing with.
Una pregunta para me encantó la expresión y esa mezcla de lo contemporáneo. No más yo. La pregunta para Coco es ¿qué te hizo escoger esa combinación de instrumentos? Porque pusiste la maraca en el pedal. ¿Cómo llegaste a el cajón, por ejemplo? ¿Cómo escogiste los colores, los platillos específicamente? O sea, ¿cómo fue ese proceso? ¿Sí? Vas a hablar un poco porque yo... Sí, te dice eso.
Quiero darle gracias a mi mamá. No, pues bien, ¿cómo te explico? Pues lo primero fue que estaba buscando una forma, estoy solo en Richmond, no hay mucha gente que toque bomba en Richmond, so, esa es la necesidad, hablando ahí. ¿Quién me va a tocar la mano? ¿Quién me va a tocar la mano? O sea, pues la necesidad, pues la de la invención, ahí pues, y si supiera que la maraca fue lo último que entró, eso fue lo último, y fue como que, adiós, pero si yo tengo este gadget allí en casa cogiendo polvo, espérate, y lo metí ahí, y ha funcionado, pero es un dolor de cabeza. Ok, pues empecé con el barril, entonces el cajón, pues yo le estaba buscando, el cajón es un instrumento súper versátil, ¿no? Tienes una batería ahí, tienes todos los agudos, los graves, entonces, pues como... Y el asiento, claro está. Todo en uno. Pues entonces, pues yo estaba buscando, siempre estaba buscando esa primero llevar las posibilidades del tambor a otro nivel, como quien dice, porque pues nosotros tenemos el tambor, pero no se ha explotado como se ha explotado, pues, decir la timba, la conga, ¿no? Los instrumentos afrocubanos, los instrumentos afrobrasileños, que se han enriquecido de la música popular para y lo han incorporado en la música popular, ¿no? Pues el barril es un instrumento virgen, entonces a la que tú le pones otros colores alrededor, pues ya él puede janguear solo por su cuenta, yeah, tú sabes, pero si tiene un par de panas ahí, tú sabes, tú sabes, exacto, pues entonces, pues qué mejor que la batería para acompañarlo. Entonces tienes el cajón que tiene ese grave, que es como un kick, ¿no? Entonces, pues el snare lo podría hacer en el cajón, pero no proyecta lo suficiente. Entonces busqué un snare, más o menos, es una cacha brasileña, pero que hace el trabajo. Pues tengo empecé con el barril, cajón y snare. Entonces el platillo, el hi-hat, que pues la batería necesita su hi-hat. ¿Cómo voy a llegar al hi-hat? Sin tratar de perder la rítmica, porque esa es otra, ¿sabes? Tienes que sí, buscar la forma de sustituir golpes para poder llegar al hi-hat, poder llegar al snare y que no se pierda el ciclo, lo cíclico del ritmo, ¿no?
¿El hi-hat es popular? No, ¿verdad?
El hi-hat, eso viene.
Eso viene.
Eso está.
Me di cuenta que está evidentemente porque tiene la maraca en un pie. Y entonces si pones el hi-hat, o sea...
Sí, pues el hi-hat tendría que ser, yo tengo un hi-hat inalámbrico. Entonces, pues lo dejo ahí y entonces el hi-hat está bien chulito acá, el pedal. Así. Pero lo bueno de ese stand es que tú, depende de la intención que tú le des, te puede sonar, te puede prolongar un poquito la nota, o si lo tocas suave, le das un toquecito normal, pues haces esto, o sea, funciona, exacto. Y eso, y así poquito a poco fui adaptándle, porque eso es otra, ¿sabes? Cuando tú estás haciendo este tipo de trabajo, tú tienes que empezar por tener tu base sólida, que como pueden ver yo no la tenía tan sólida, pero estamos llegando. Entonces, pues una vez tienes tu base sólida, vas incorporando. Bueno, voy a sustituir estos golpes de aquí para meterlos aquí, que no van a molestar, pues porque el ciclo está corriendo. ¿Me entiendes? O sea, se olvidó, pero aquel lo sustituyó y se oyó bien. Y así vas metiéndole colores. Es un dibujo, todo un dibujo. Tú sabes, y por ahí vamos.
Reminded me very much of Jose Limon's work, which you must have studied as a trained dancer. I'm just curious as to whether Jose Limon's choreography helped you as a contemporary dancer get in touch with your Puerto Rican roots.
I could think as I walked. First and foremost, as a young dancer in the United States, so I came here when I was 12. I had already trained in Puerto Rico, but became a very serious dancer here, and studied here in New York City with the Albany American Dance Center as a scholarship student. So I was very involved in the African American tradition of modern dance, which is extremely rich, as a Latina. Right, and so that's very interesting. My first training in the States was in Princeton, New Jersey, in which I was the only Latina, and that has all its politics and difficulties. Then I came to New York City, where I was one of the few Latinas in an African American context, but where I was much more welcomed, I felt, culturally, and yet still the other in another context. So figures like Jose Limon were very important as role models of possibility as a Latina artist, and someone from very early on in modern dance, not contemporary to me, but someone that is studied in the canon, right? And there's so many others that don't make it to the canon, and that's a really interesting project yet to still be done of Latinos and Puerto Ricans in modern dance, in the history of modern dance here. So yes, first as a model, very, very important. And then his combination of extreme technique with really clear theatricality was also really important. How can you tell a story of significance and that has a cultural depth, again, without being stereotypical, but very specific, and without losing whatsoever the technical excellence of the field. So, yes.
Buenas tardes, muchísimas gracias por la presentación. Encantado de verlos, yo tuve la oportunidad de ir a Puerto Rico, yo soy de Brasil, ¿no? Encantado de ver un poco de nuevo lo que vi ayer, un poco transformado, recreado, ¿no? Quería preguntarle un poco más sobre las opciones estético-políticas que han tomado ustedes en este trabajo, en lo que significa, pensando un poco en la temporalidad, ¿no? de la presentación con la temporalidad de las danzas a las cuales se refieren, ¿no? O sea, me parece por lo que pude sentir un poco en esta última parte, hay una especie de lectura, ¿no? Que se refiere muy precisamente a lo que es la bomba que uno conoce, ¿no? O sea, por así decirlo, más tradicional. Pero después hay una preocupación marcada en mostrar las transformaciones y transiciones posibles, múltiples aberturas. Pero al final parece que se retoma, ¿no? Hay una especie de retorno al origen al final, no sé, una pregunta que me hago. Y la segunda es con relación a género también. O sea, me parece que hay un uso de la vestimenta, también del movimiento, que tiene quizá un tránsito de género también. Gracias.
Ay, ya hay que parar después de aquí. Sí, a las dos. Un juego, ¿verdad? Un juego con la referencia, con la posibilidad y con no negar la referencia otra vez. Para mí ha sido importante. Por lo menos hasta ahora, ¿no? Querer hacer esa referencia bien clara de la estructura que existe en la forma, porque la estoy aprendiendo también, ¿verdad? Y me siento very much like a beginner in that. So there's a lot of respect of what is the form, and then how much liberty can I take with it. Y de verdad lo digo muy en serio, con mucho respeto, porque sé que esto es a lifelong experience, y yo llevo 1 año con Zika. Y aquí había yubá y había otras cosas, pero realmente lo que yo estoy bailando es cuando llegamos al Zika. Entonces, sí, creo que está ese juego con el ir y el venir, pero el regresar, pero ¿cómo regresar de una manera un poquito diferente? Entonces, por ejemplo, al principio, cuando abrimos con un yubá, que es más grave, más como profundo, tal vez más triste, ahí estoy pensando mucho en una memoria tal vez fragmentada, en un tratar de recordar algo que conozco pero no conozco. Y cómo traducir eso a mi cuerpo, cómo romper algo que sea realmente el tiquete, pero no va a ser el tiquete completo, porque no lo entiendo bien todavía, porque es solo una pista de aquello. Cuando termino con más ownership, perhaps, would be a word that I would use, so a sense of ownership, to the extent that I can right now, right, of the form and how I'm experimenting with it. Lo mismo con la vestimenta, ¿no? Cuando yo empecé a trabajar con esto, me dijo, no, ¿necesitas falda? Y yo dije, no. No, yo no bailo con falda. Y por mucho tiempo bailé sin falda. Entonces, que eso fue como mucha negotiating with myself. What did it mean for me to take on this idea of the traditional? Because I don't know, esas faldas realmente que se usan en las presentaciones folclóricas, what historical accuracy do they have? I don't know, right? So the idea of the falda is also a sort of construction, right, that goes with gender construction. Yo tenía mucha resistencia a hacer eso. Pero fui a Puerto Rico y con Tata Cepeda, pues ella enseña con falda. Y volví con una falda mía. Esa es mi falda, de Tata Cepeda, que me dio ella al final de la semana. Entonces, aprender, la falda realmente la entendí también como un uso que me facilitaba ciertas cosas coreográficas, porque tiene un peso, tiene un vuelo, cambia, el movimiento cambia y la sensación cambia. Entonces, por ejemplo, algo que tengo que terminar. Un dance scholar que me ha influenciado mucho, Brenda Dixon Gottschalk, habla del Africanist aesthetic y habla de la improvisación as an important aspect of the Africanist aesthetic, the democracy of body parts, and the aesthetic of the cool. Y yo sentí que yo entendí the aesthetic of the cool in relationship to the skirt, porque me daba tanta cosa que yo podía así y después, aquí estoy, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿cómo traducir eso sin la falda? ¿Verdad? Y porque entonces pues, también my statement es como hay muchas mujeres ahora, hoy en día, muchas mujeres bailando sin falda, y muchos grupos de bomba de mujeres nada más. So I'm in conversation with that.